Good morning, everybody. We are here at the Missouri Botanical Garden this morning. I'm Christina, here with Cassidy, and today we are starting off our tour here in the English Woodland Garden. And we are going to take you on a little adventure, sort of searching for signs of spring today, looking for signs of life, things that are starting to sprout up as we watch this snow melt away and expect a week of warmer weather this week. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this camera around and we will start walking. And it's a very beautiful morning here today. It feels like spring, just being in the upper 30s after the past week of single digits and terrible wind chills. And you can hear in the background, you can hear a lot of birds that are here in the English Woodland Garden out today enjoying the sun as well.
Last week all the staff worked to clear the main paths, so all the walking paths are clear and virtually dry except for maybe a little snow melt that's creeping over the paths, so very accessible on those main paths. And I imagine by the end of the day today, if not tomorrow, when we open for visitors tomorrow, most of the snow should be gone.
You see the water running, not frozen at all anymore.
We featured this on a past tour, but in terms of things that are in bloom right now, it's one of the few that's hard to miss. This witch hazel here, Chinese witch hazel, on the main path in the English woodland. And we did a virtual tour of the witch hazel collection a few weeks ago, so if you're interested in seeing that, you can find that on the video tab on our Facebook page or on our YouTube page, where we looked at all different kinds of witch hazels which are in bloom right now, and especially on these warmer and sunnier days. As we walk through, you'll probably notice some green in the landscape. There's a fair number of different types of hollies in the English woodland that are providing that green. There's also things like this Evergreen Azalea here, just adding some color to the landscape as we walk around, so it's not all just brown And there's Dave Gunn. He takes care of the English Woodland, so he's off to work on some project. But there's actually a fair amount of green as we walk by, in addition to some of those colors. Here's another witch hazel that's got a little color to it. Here's something I wanted to point out. You know, this is the time, now that we're getting into spring, you're going to see things start to come out of the ground, and it's almost hidden here under the leaf litter, which acts as sort of nature's insulation for events like we had last week with the snow and the cold. But if you kind of dig out the leaves a little bit, you see all these sprouts coming out of the ground. There's even more back here. So these are all for resurrection lilies, surprise lilies. They actually put out their foliage in the spring, and the foliage dies back, and then a flower comes out on a stalk in the summer. And so you can see these just starting to come out of the ground. And because they've been under the leaves, they're not nice and green with chlorophyll as they will be once they're exposed and start soaking up that sunlight. But you can kind of see there's a nice little patch here, all tucked away nice and warm under those leaves. So we'll probably just cover them back up a little bit.
Yeah, keep them warm.
Just in case, you know, for the overnights. But there's so much of that happening right now. I've seen that with the daffodils as well. In other parts of the garden starting to come up, and even some of the tulips. Some species tulips in the bulb garden are putting out their foliage, starting to soak up that energy, and as long as they can make it through cold snaps like we had last week, they'll have a nice head start for those warm and sunny days ahead. And similar to what I was just mentioning with those surprise lilies, we have something else that's popping up through the leaves. This is winter aconite, and you can see it's actually got flowers on. So winter aconite puts out these little yellow flowers, and they'll open up a little more, but they're in the buttercup family, and they're just this nice little super early spring ephemeral. And you can see even more coming up here, so there's a nice little grouping of them. And there's a handful of these patches of winter aconite in the woodland here, the English woodland where we're at, and then also there's a nice patch in the bulb garden. Another plant that's in flower right now, that but not here in the woodland, is snowdrops, galanthus, and there's a nice grouping of those in the bulb garden. So those have nice big white drooping flowers and are pretty appropriate for a day like this. I walked by them on my way here to the English woodland, and they're out and in flower, hanging right over the top and blending in with the snowfall. But this is winter aconite. Again, another sign that spring is coming, because this is one of the first flowers other than witch hazel to start blooming outside. And I'll cover those back up too, just in case.
And over here in the snow, it's just fun to see some signs of the wildlife that's been active before we got here. See some tracks. You can kind of see some little phalange type shapes. So we think this was probably a squirrel or something, just based on the size and the fingers. We've also seen some tracks that look more like raccoons. And of course there's always bird and bunny tracks in here in the woodland garden as well. It's kind of fun to see that evidence left behind in the snow.
Talking about how one of the things that's creating some of that green backdrop as we walk through are the azaleas and rhododendrons. So this is one that, just pointing out the buds on there, the flower buds. So it may be a while before these actually bloom, because a lot of our azaleas and rhododendrons tend to bloom late April into May. But you can see they're already getting prepared for that big moment by putting on these buds. And then because they have their leaves on, they're absorbing a lot of energy from the sun. That some of these other plants that are still dormant just aren't quite doing it. It's a bit hard to see from down here, but there are some of the bigger trees are starting to put out buds. Maples, I've noticed the maples are, you can start to see kind of reddish color on some of them. Way up there in the distance.
Yeah.
A little hard to see from down here. And then over here is actually, this is a tulip tree. And what you're seeing still on it are the leftover dried fruits from last year. So those hang on tulip trees for a long time and make for a really easy identifier before you have leaves and flowers and things to look at. So really interesting, especially here in the woodland with the diversity of tree species. And the big overhead canopy to kind of look at some tree ID and And because they're all labeled, you can check your answers pretty immediately and find out if you got it right.
And we've talked throughout the winter about winter being a great time for appreciating tree barks. So I just wanted to point out this one, which is a really interesting, distinct, colorful bark. This is a Paperbark Maple tree. So again, especially with more distinct barks like this, practicing tree ID in the winter, this is a great way to tell trees apart if you can start to recognize different barks.
I don't know if you can hear it if we stand still for a second. But you can kind of hear that rustling sound. So that's coming from this tree above us here, and the one next to it, which is an oak tree. And because these trees have held on to their leaves so long through the winter season, they're actually, one, creating some visual interest because there's still something to see besides the branches, but then also as that wind picks up and blows through, you get that really nice rustling sound, which combined with the birds and the sort of other sounds of spring that we've been hearing this morning. If you come out and visit us, you can enjoy it without having to hear us talk through it. And still lots of what people think of as, you know, winter interest forms. So this is a hydrangea that's held on to its flowering structure, the flower head, through the winter. And so just kind of another thing to catch your attention as you walk through. The birds are just so active.
Yeah. can see a couple in this tree up here,
Yeah,
flitting
any
around.
ornithologists out there that can give us an ID? I think I'm gonna have to get a field book and start working on bird ID, because I feel silly that I don't know what birds those were just now. And I'm sure their call is distinct enough for people that know these things to pick that out rather immediately. I know Mike Saxton, who heads the ecological restoration efforts out at Shaw Nature Reserve. He's an avid birder, and I know he loves to come out here in the spring and just bring a pair of binoculars and his set of sharp ears and see how many species he can find.
And as we're exiting the English Woodland Garden here, this field in the springtime, early spring, will be full of crocus, which is another early bloomer. We don't have any blooming right now, but as with some of those other examples, you can see little sprouts coming up, pushing up through the snow here. Again, just with that promise of life and spring just around the corner. Especially with the sun today and the really warm temperatures expected tomorrow. That's going to do a lot for these early blooms. So thank you all for joining in on this tour today. I hope you enjoyed seeing some of these signs of spring coming. Hope you can get out and enjoy the weather today and come visit us tomorrow when it's going to be really a lovely day here in St. Louis. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time, keeping you updated on those spring blooms just around the corner. Bye.